First off, guys, I want to introduce Dr. Paul Arciero, arguably one of the best nutritional researchers for the last, Dr. Paul's at 38 years. Am I close?
That's right on, Mike. Yep.
Yes, okay. I've done my research a little bit. Okay. You started at Washington University School of Medicine and Physiology, then on to University of Vermont, Masters in Nutritional Sciences, off to Purdue and Masters of Science in Exercise Physiology. And you are part of the College Sports Medicine and Obesity Society and International Society of Sports Nutrition. And again, over 70 published peer-reviewed human clinical trials. Does that sound right? Am I
That's
close?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, over 70. Yeah.
I had 58 on there, and I had to do a little more research and found there were a few more.
Good.
Um, and the author of the protein pacing diet, and also Dr. Paul, can you put up your book here
Yeah.
because I want people to be able to
I
get
know
to
it
this
might be backwards, but it's the prize life, Mike. We can talk
prize
about
life.
it. The prize life, Prise for prize.
There you go, guys. All right. So I have, matter of fact, I have his initial book here.
Yep.
And so I'm going to be getting the new one actually as we get off this call here. It's available on Amazon, correct?
Yes, it is.
All right, all right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on and really, guys, this is for the sole purpose, not to convince or sell anyone, because if you guys are on social media, everyone seems like they have something in the health and wellness industry, and I'm bringing Dr. Paul on really just to talk just the science. We're not financially linked or connected in any way. He is a third-party researcher that has brought in the protein pacing method with intermittent nutritional fasting. So thank you for coming on today. And with that said, Dr. Paul, can you explain really the difference? I just want to dive right into this. Between the difference between, like, say, clinical trials, say science, and say third-party peer-reviewed human clinical trials.
Sure. Yeah, Mike, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. This is always a fun topic for me. For people to have confidence and belief in adopting a new way of living, and in this case, we're talking about an improvement, a new way of improving their health. It's actually mandatory. It's actually essential. It's paramount. It's the most important thing that they can do to choose information and incorporate information that stems from peer-reviewed human clinical trial research. There's lots of what is called research out in the public domain. People claim that they have research on YouTube and other social media outlets, but until you have in your hand, in your possession, the actual peer-reviewed human clinical trial investigation, original investigation study, I would be very hesitant to embrace, adopt, and follow any information that you're receiving. So I really give you a lot of credit for beginning our conversation here, emphasizing that for all your listeners and watchers, because that should be the starting point. I think there's just so much misinformation. People are being misled into thinking a healthy lifestyle is the best path forward for them without any peer-reviewed human clinical trial research. Because what that means is the study has been conducted by a third-party independent scientist at an accredited university around the world. And that's what I do. I'm a third-party independent scientist. I'm currently at the University of Pittsburgh, one of the world-leading research institutions in the world. We can't conduct research just on a whim. We can't conduct research independent of the safeguards that are in place. And what I'm talking about specifically is that when we receive funding, and funding can come from the government, it can come from philanthropic organizations, it can come from private industry. And I know from some of you out there, you've been misled or misguided in thinking that private industry funding is somehow tainted or biased. And that's just not true. If you're doing research in the proper ethical way that it is intended to be conducted, it doesn't matter where the source of funding is coming from, because you have all of the safeguards in place to clean out and remove any bias or any subjectivity around the research. So when you get this funding from those three major sources, private industry, philanthropic, and government, like the National Institute of Health, the Department of Defense, or something like that, Homeland Security, the list goes on and on. The funding doesn't come to the researcher personally. It comes from a governing body at the institution, at the university. It's called the Sponsored Research Office. And they abide by very strict guidelines that are in place, that have been set in place by governing bodies around the world at the highest level of safety and ethical standards. So, to suggest that funding that comes from private industry or philanthropic sources is any different from government is, I call it pig water. You'll hear me use that term because it's what we hear about all the time on social media, this misguided information. There's no difference. These standards are in place regardless of where the funding is coming from. And once it gets approved, the study, you have to have it approved for the ability to keep the human subjects that are participating safe, first and foremost. The outcomes of the research are really secondary to maintaining the safety of the human study participants. And therefore, it has to be passed through something called the Institutional Review Board. And that's a group of, again, independent experts that review the study design and protocol and determine whether or not it's worthy of being conducted. But most importantly, it's a study that will keep human participants safe and free of harm. And so we have to go through very strict certification process to ensure that when we conduct our research, the safety of human participants is at the highest level. So yeah, there's so many safeguards, and that's before the research even starts. So I just want to put that out there. You can imagine once you conduct the study, the ongoing checks and balances that are in place to ensure the safety of the study participants. Once you've collected all the data, the analysis of the data, it's not done in a vacuum. It's done with multiple eyes from multiple different individuals, experts in their field that review it. And when you then eventually want to get it published, you can't just throw it on the internet, as many people do, and call it research or publish research. That's not what we do at all. As a scientist, you need to submit it to a scientific medical journal with a medical board of editors that review it to determine whether it's even worthy to go out to the experts around the world. Like myself, I'm considered an expert. I review studies all the time. In fact, I could review a study daily. I literally get an academic medical scientific journal sending me an article to review every day. There's not a day that I don't receive one that I'm being asked to review it because of my status in the field. So we're constantly being asked as experts to review independent studies that are taking place around the world, not just in our little, parochial location of where we are, but, articles that are received all over the world. And we provide our objective feedback. We don't know the researchers in many instances. In fact, we have to remove ourselves if there's a conflict of interest as an external reviewer that we've been invited to review for a scientific medical journal. So I just want people to know that the information that you share is from the highest source of rigor in scientific, ethical standards, sophistication that is available to us right now. So I want people to know that the belief in the information and the content that you're providing is at the highest level achievable right now for scientists. So I feel really good about what you're doing, and I'm happy to support you.
Yeah, no, it is one of those things where there's so much information out there because you'll hear things like scientifically proven, clinically proven, and it doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's an information. It could mean that it is valid. However, what I'm hearing you say is taking it where you're taking it where it's really third-party peer reviewed, kind of removes this potential for bias that maybe could exist in other studies. I mean, is that a fair statement?
Yeah, no, it is. But I would go back to what you said earlier. Oftentimes when you do see things that do say published scientific research study or proven benefits, a lot of times, depending upon where it's coming from, I would say, no, it's not probably truthful. No, it's not something that would be accurate information. No, so you have to be a real sleuth. Unless it says peer reviewed, it has to say peer reviewed, published original investigation research. I probably wouldn't pay much attention to it,
Yeah,
because then you can get duped, and many times that is subjective. So you want to make sure that you're obtaining your information from peer-reviewed human clinical trial original investigations, because there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of information that's what we call borrowed science. So a lot of companies, a lot of social media gurus and so-called experts will take science from other scientists and interpret it the way they want it to be interpreted, and then say, hey, look at this research that found this, or research supports what I'm advocating, and they don't have the direct evidence that there is actually support. And one last point, there's a lot of research on animal research. The animal model research is often used and transferred to that which we want to, what many people want then humans to follow. And that's a big leap. We're not animals. We're not
right.
rodents. We're not primates. We're not cell lines. And so I'm true to human research. I think there's value in animal model research, but it's a massive leap to
Yeah.
suggest that what we find in animals is also what we would find in humans. There's oftentimes a path that follows from what we find in animals to humans, but it's a big leap to suggest that what we're finding in animals is going to occur in humans. So I just caution people about that too, because there's a source of massive misinformation. There's a tremendous amount of science that's being borrowed or extrapolated from a cell line, from an animal model into a human, and people are being misled to thinking that that is what will occur in humans, and it's just not true.
Yeah, I mean, I
How
would
can
just
that be?
assume like, an animal has a different digestive tract than, humans, and different acids and pH levels. I mean, I'm certainly not a doctor or scientist here, but uh, just from what I know. And Dr. Paul, all I can say is, I've done all these different diets, from paleo, keto, intermittent fasting, cleanses, all these certain things. And my story is this: I was 30% body fat, and now I'm 52, and I've gone down to as low as 10% body fat on this on this protocol. And I'll float now anywhere from 11, 12 to maybe 15, and kind of float throughout the year a little bit. But the interesting thing for me is, everyone always says, as the older you get, you put on weight, right? But and you lose muscle and you get weaker. Well, I've added 25 pounds of muscle. I went down to 179 pounds, Dr. Paul, and now I'm like 205. And I kept freaking out about the scale. I'm like, why is the scale going up?
Hmm.
And I didn't understand um, that I was actually putting muscle on. And if I tell people, like, look, if you put on 5% muscle mass over your entire body, you're probably not going to notice it per se. You're not going to look in the mirror and go, oh, look at this, I put on 5%. That takes time. And so I kind of want to dive right into this because let's get right to this, because this is, I was just on a call with you yesterday. There were over 200 people, I think, on the call. And can you share about this new groundbreaking research that was just launched? Because I mean, I'm sitting here reading this, and I just got the cliff notes right now. I haven't even dove into it. I know you could probably go deep into this, but just give us some bullet points, what you have found through this protein pacing, intermittent nutritional fasting process that is having all these benefits. Because it did go up against, correct me if I'm wrong, it did go up against the Mediterranean style diet. Is that correct?
Yes, it did. The heart healthy Mediterranean style diet. That's
Wow.
correct. Yeah. So Mike, let's finish up with this, and I'm happy to end this way because it is so, like you said, novel and groundbreaking. It was a landmark study. It was published in Nature Communications, and if you're not familiar, those of you watching this with Nature Communications, I urge you very strongly to go and seek out the degree of scientific rigor and sophistication that Nature Communications holds in the field of medicine and science. It's of the top tier journal. And we published in there showing that the gut microbiome actually remodels, and our metabolic uh, profile in our body improves significantly in response to what you've been describing. What I've created, protein pacing and then nutritional fasting, versus this continuous heart healthy Mediterranean style eating pattern, which by the way has been voted #1 for 7 years straight. So yeah, this is a monumental finding. What we were able to actually scientifically document is that the diversity of our gut microbiome, and our gut microbiome is the equivalent of a botanical garden. And I like to use that analogy because most people, when they envision or think about what a botanical garden looks like, it's really plush with lots of different varieties of flowers. Um, and different species of different plants and flora, flowering plants and things like that. And the reason why a botanical garden has that richness to it and that diversity of color and different forms of species of plants is because they have such a variety. It kind of feeds itself. We know that when we produce one particular strain of a crop, of a variety of a plant, for example, it does not thrive. It actually struggles because the soil becomes less able to help support it because it needs that diversity to help support it. And so the same is with our gut. When we eliminate different strains of bacteria, fungi, and other microbes that reside inside of our gut, we become very diseased. We become very unhealthy. In fact, there's direct line of evidence that the less diversity that we have in our gut microflora, our botanical garden inside of our stomach, our intestines, the more diseased we become, just like it would out in nature. And so what we were able to document is that in as little as 8 weeks, those that were following the protein pacing and nutritional fasting had a 25% increase in the diversity of their microflora.
Wow.
Mike, I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. That is massive. And again, this was in comparison to a very significant increase in the microflora that was increasing in the heart healthy Mediterranean diet. They had a wonderful
So they
increase.
increase in both
Both
situations.
groups.
Both.
Yes, both treatment groups increased, Mike, but the protein pacing nutritional fasting had a 25. I know even just to say that is incredible. A 25% increase. Some of the other changes that we found was a 33% greater loss of their visceral fat. That's the fat that's around their vital organs. And then they had massive amounts of total body fat loss. They were able to increase the proportion of their healthy, lean body mass, that includes their muscles, by 6%. They had a 6% increase
Wow.
in their healthy proportion of lean muscle mass after the end of 8 weeks. And I should stress that they weren't allowed to exercise during this 8-week time period. So these amazing changes that took place occurred independent of doing any physical activity. And so I just want to emphasize that because the strength of what we consume and what we nourish our body with is the most important and powerful lifestyle strategy that we can do. So I think that's a really good way to end. It's
Yeah,
been a
that's
pleasure to be on
amazing.
here with you. And I'm happy to join in on another call with you.
Yeah, Dr. Paul,